Hello everyone. In today's podcast, we are going to talk about the life of one of the greatest Sufi masters in the Islamic mystical tradition. I'm talking about the great Sheikh known as Sheikh Al-Akbar, Muhyiddin bin Arabi. Today we are going to talk a little bit about his biography, his place of birth, his achievements, and some of his mystical experiences. Muhyiddin bin Arabi was born as Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad al-Hatimi al-Tai al-Andalusi on July 28th of the year 1165 in Murcia, Spain, at that time known as Al-Andalus. While occasionally Ibn Arabi spoke of particular events, his early life is not known in detail. He mentioned briefly about his life, but we don't know specific details about his life. From a very young age, we know that he exhibited a keen interest in learning and a remarkable spiritual precocity. And while still a child, he was instructed in the Sufi way. We know that two elderly women who were very revered and for their stainless lives and mystical attainments in Al-Andalus. So Ibn Arabi studied with them. As a young man, he traveled to Ishbiliya, to Seville, and there he studied with other Islamic scholars. He studied the Quran, the Sharia, the Hadith, which are the traditional sayings and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad. In his writings, Ibn Arabi also shows some knowledge of Neoplatonic philosophy, Hermetic tradition, alchemy, astrology, among many more topics connected to different knowledges or branches of sciences. And Ibn Arabi was so well known, even in his young age, that we know that the famous philosopher Ibn Rushd, Averroes as he called him, indeed sought to meet Ibn Arabi when Ibn Arabi was only 19 years old. And there is a famous anecdote that both of them met at Ibn Rushd's house, and we know that Ibn Rushd, the famous philosopher, asked the young man a critical question for those aspirants of wisdom. He asked him, to Ibn Arabi, "Do the fruits of mystic illumination agree with the philosophical speculation?" Ibn Arabi paused for a moment, then responded, "Yes and no. Between the yeah and nay, the spirits take their flight beyond matter." Ibn Rushd went pale in the presence of this subtle wisdom that indeed reinforced his own innermost thoughts and challenged his life's work. And later on, it is known that Averroes, Ibn Rushd, confided to his friends the following: "Glory to Allah that I have lived at a time when there exists a master of this experience, one of those who opens the locks of his doors. Glory to Allah that I was granted the gift of seeing one of them myself." In addition to his studies, we know that Ibn Arabi cultivated the art of meditation. Thrice in his life, he encountered Khidr, the companion of Moses, and the invisible guide, the prototypical teacher of all Sufis. Mystically, the Khidr, according to the mystic Sufi theology tradition, it says that he lives in all times and all places, assisting sincere devotees to stay squarely on the path. The highest of the Sufic privilege is to be made the disciple of this spiritual master. The first meeting occurred in a dream. Ibn Arabi had disagreed with his teacher, Sheikh Abdul Hassan, over some points of doctrine, and while Ibn Arabi was sleeping late that night, Khidr appeared to the dreamer, saying, "The things that your teacher told you were right. Accept them." Ibn Arabi awoke with a start and rushed in the middle of the night to his teacher's house. And while he was still without breath, explaining his dream, the Sheikh showed no surprise. He explained that he had appealed to Khidr in meditation to correct his brilliant but stubborn student. On hearing that, Ibn al-Arabi later wrote, "I once and for all decided never to disagree again with him." The second encounter took place during a visit to Tunisia. Ibn Arabi was staying abroad. He was staying aboard a ship, but found one evening that he could not sleep. As he paced the deck, he noticed the figure walking across the water towards him. So, who was this man who was walking on the water towards Ibn Arabi? Khidr. He walked up to the edge of the boat and talked briefly with the stunned disciple. When Al-Khadr left, he disappeared over the horizon of the sea in 3 steps. Ibn Arabi never revealed the contents of that conversation, but he recorded that while he was walking through the streets of Tunis the next morning, an old sheikh came up to him and asked how his meeting with Al-Khadr had gone. And the third time that Ibn Arabi encountered this spiritual guide, Al-Khadr, as they call him, was indeed in Al Andalus. It was in one of the Andalusian mosques where Ibn Arabi was giving a lecture on the function of creative imagination in so-called miracles. And we know that several of those listening rejected the idea that the purified human mind could work wonders. Al-Khadr entered the mosque, unrecognized by all save Ibn Arabi, and rolled out his prayer mat, and suddenly he rose 16 feet into the air and said his prayers from that altitude. The salat, the prayer finished. He drifted slowly to the floor and left. Thus ended the debate on the creative powers of the human mind. This is one of those stories that have come down until up to our days. Ibn Arabi attended the funeral of the great philosopher Ibn Rushd Averroes and wrote the haunting lines. These lines as follow: "This is the Imam, the leader, and these his works. Would that I knew whether his hopes were realized." About the year 1200, he journeyed to Marrakesh and there revived the call to go to the east. Around this time, his urge to communicate to others what he had learned and in the sacred sanctuary of the soul matched his will to plumb the depths of meditation. Books, essays, commentaries poured forth in amazing profusion. He himself recorded 251 works, from short essays to the massive Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyya, the Meccan revelation, Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyya, and the printed edition of which consists of 2,500 pages. In Marrakesh, he was told in a vision to go to the city of Fez, where he would meet a certain Muhammad al-Hasar, who would accompany him to the east. The meeting occurred as promised, and the two companions went to Bijaya and Tunis, and quickly passed on to Alexandria and Cairo, where Al-Hasar died. Alone, Ibn Arabi continued on his journey to Mecca, where he had the culminating experience of his life. It was there that he met the wise Abu Shajja Zahir ibn Rustam, who warmly welcomed him into a small company of learned men and women. And we know that something happened to Ibn Arabi during this trip. Ibn Arabi wrote the following: "This sheikh had a virgin daughter, a slender child who captivated all who looked on her, whose presence gave lustre to gatherings, who amazed all she was with and ravished the senses of all who beheld her. She was a sage among the sages of the holy places. And inspired by her radiant presence and tranquil wisdom, Ibn al-Arabi found in her really a source of inspiration. And about the year 1215, he completed his Tarjuman al-Ashwaq, the interpreter of desires, a collection of mystical odes in the form of love poems, reminiscent of the like the Song of Psalms, similar to that style that we find in the in this book of the Hebrew Bible, written by the king Solomon. There, in these poems, as we know, the Sufis sometimes write in a style that is not understood by the person who is not really trained in this kind of mystical tradition, and the poems that Ibn Arabi wrote indeed became a big issue because of the Orthodox scholars felt compelled to address the issue and did criticize Ibn Arabi because the sensuous texture of this kind of poetry. And because of these critics, Ibn Arabi then felt compelled to compose a commentary upon these poems to explain to the people the real meaning of the poetry and not what they thought about it. And while he was in Mecca, Ibn Arabi received 2 initiations. We know that because he explained this in details. The first was a vision of the eternal youth who fuses in himself all pairs of opposites. The second confirmed him as the seal of the saints. In the year 1204, he traveled to the city of Baghdad and then to the city of Mosul, where he received a 3rd initiation and wrote his famous Mosul Revelations. He then returned to Cairo in the year 1206, only to find that also very orthodox Islamic scholars openly hostile to him, and he was saved from arrest and probably execution by the timely intervention of a Tunisian friend who had the ear of the Ayyubid ruler of Egypt. He sought then refuge in the appreciative society of Mecca and then traveled to Aleppo, Halab in Syria, and then to Konya in what is Turkey today. Here he was formally honored by the king Kaikous, who gave him an elegant villa as a present, and Ibn Arabi gave the house as alms to a beggar, and soon all of Konya, the city of Konya, fell in love with Ibn Arabi. His chief local disciple in that region was Sadr ad-Din al-Kunawi, and his disciple wrote commentaries on the works of his master, and years later he sat at the feet of Jalaluddin Rumi, the famous Sufi master, and indeed he brought together the ideation of the teachings of the Arabs and the Persian Sufis together. So after this sojourn that took him to the borders of Armenia, back to Mecca and to Aleppo, he accepted an invitation to reside in Damascus in Syria, and from the year 1223 until his death in November 1240, he stayed there as a teacher and writer. During this period of semi-retirement, he composed his poetic Diwan and the Fusus al-Hikam, or also known in English as the Seals of Wisdom, which is indeed, this book is like a summary of his mystical philosophy. For Ibn Arabi, the touchstone of vision, philosophy, and daily life was Wahdat al-Wujud, the oneness of being. His sublime unity must be experienced to be understood, and it is the heart of all knowledge. But the illusions which can deceive the novice are immense. In his Meccan revelations, he declared the following regarding the Sufi way: knowledge of mystical states can only be had by actual experience, nor can the reason of man define it, nor arrive at any cognizance of it by deduction, as is also the case with knowledge of the taste of honey, the bitterness of patience, the bliss of sexual union, love, passion, or desire, all of which cannot possibly be known unless one is properly qualified or experiences them directly. So this is mainly a short biography of this great Sufi master, Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, as he is known as Sheikh Al-Akbar, the greatest of the masters, the greatest master indeed. His knowledge, his wisdom is really well known all over the world, not only within the Arabic or Islamic tradition, but also outside in the field of academy, universities, and is subject of study. We have to say that most of the books that Ibn Arabi wrote are still in manuscript, and very few of them have been published, and really not that many translations in English or other languages. So because of the length of his books, the material is so much that indeed we don't have really scholars that have taken up this arduous work of translation, and that's why most of his books are still preserved in manuscripts. I want to thank you all for your attention today. Thank you so much, and I hope to see each other again in the next podcast.